Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. February was an interesting reading month. It was shorter, and I didn't feel like I got much reading done. Yet I managed to stay on par with January and finished 11 books. Let's get right into them. I read a whole lot of poetry this month and really loved it. 3 of these I've already made videos for. Passion by June Jordan, Black Girl Call Home by Jasmine, and Don't Call Us Dead by Danez. I also read Crossfire by Staceyann, which will have a video coming out next week. And then Jen over at Remember Reads recommended listening to Danez's audiobook poetry. So I listened to their other collection, Homie. Homie was really good too, but I did prefer Don't Call Us Dead. I did a lot of audiobooks in February, starting with Woman Talking, based on a true but disgusting story. Women Talking is about a Mennonite community where many of the women were drugged and raped in their sleep for years. The men of the colony claimed it was demons or God's punishment, when in reality it was a group of the men from the colony, and the rest of the men were complicit. How fucking horrific. I feel so awful for the woman this really happened to. So the book begins with all of the rapists in jail, and the rest of the men driving into the city to try to bail them out. Meanwhile, the women of the colony hold a meeting to discuss what happened to them and what to do now. Should they stay and pretend it never happened, try to hold their husbands and brothers accountable, or should they pack up and start a new life free of their assailants? Narrated by the one man who wasn't involved, who just recently returned to the colony, because as a man, he is the only one present who's able to read and write to record the minutes of the meeting. Obviously, this is a really heavy read, but it's so good. Despite the subject matter, I didn't find it terribly triggering. There was a level of detachment to it, since all the conversations were happening after the fact. If that's still too much for you, I get it, and would not encourage you to read this book. But if you can stomach it, Women Talking definitely is worth a read. After Women Talking, I listened to Don't Cry For Me, on Charlie Brooks' recommendation. What an excellent recommendation. Don't Cry For Me is a piece of autofiction. The author Daniel Black is a gay black man, and IRL, his father never accepted him, so he had no relationship with his dad until his death. So Black wrote this novel from the perspective of the father, writing letters to his gay son on his deathbed, trying to explain himself. I appreciated hearing about this experience from the parent's perspective. He's a dick, but I could appreciate the closure one could get from writing this kind of story. It's a really sad novel, a dying man full of regrets, but it's just beautifully done. Unlike Women Talking, Don't Cry For Me did have an incredibly graphic and triggering scene. I really want to talk about it, but maybe not on here. So, announcement time. I finally have a Patreon. So if you support me on Patreon, you will get exclusive access to my discussion of this spoilery, triggery scene. Link to join will be in the description below. The Grammy Awards were in February, and Viola Davis achieved EGOT status after winning the Grammy for her audiobook, Finding Me. Of course I had to listen to this award-winning audiobook. I haven't really seen a lot of Viola's work, but I still loved learning about her life. It was fascinating to me that most of her film and television career doesn't even come up until the last chapter. I'm sure fans might have expected the bulk of the book to be about filming things that they had watched or were already familiar with. But no, Viola really takes her time to share her entire life with us. I also loved when she talked about The Help. Pretty problematic film, and shares what she would have done differently if she had had more creative control. Ways that she would have made the black characters more well-rounded and believable. Yeah, this performance was so good and definitely deserving of that Grammy. Kim at Middle of the Book March recently read The Fire This Time by Jesmyn Ward, and it sounded so good I made it my next audiobook. It is a collection of essays about black lives in the past, present, and future, inspired by the works of James Baldwin. This was a magnificent collection. One of my favorite essays in the collection was about Phyllis Wheatley, America's first published black poet. I read her poetry collection last year and loved it. In this essay, though, the author explains how little we know from Wheatley's life, and how there are no surviving first-hand accounts of what happened to her, only the words of some white lady who may or may not have even known her. There was also an hilarious essay about Rachel Dolezal that referred to her as the imitation of life. This was a great collection, and I learned a lot from it. In the last few days of February, I wanted to squeeze in one more book, so I read the novella Flowers for the Sea. This is a gothic dystopian fantasy about a flooded kingdom, where all its residents now live on an ark, with nautical beasts circling below. Our protagonist, Araxi, is pregnant, which is a big deal because since the flood, not one person has been able to carry a child to term. Araxi has a feeling this is no ordinary child, and she wants nothing to do with it, but those in charge have stripped her of her autonomy, forcing her to bring this child into the world. Oh, this was such a good read. So beautifully written. If you're a fan of Octavia Butler, you'll definitely love Rocklyn's debut. The last book I read this month was a buddy read with Gina Stanier. We read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. It's about an elderly Polish woman living near the Czech border, and several men in her area have recently been killed, and it's becoming harder and harder to believe that they're all just disconnected hunting accidents. Doesn't that sound great? But it's not so great. Our amateur detective makes little to no effort to solve the case herself. She's content to just believe it was animals. Wild animals seeking vengeance for climate change. And isn't bothering to look for evidence or conduct interviews. Everything we see her do is ancillary to the mystery. Like, she has visits with her friend who's translating poetry, she hangs out at the thrift store or at the dentist, but we never see her take an active role in trying to solve this case. The most she does is write letters to the police telling them that they're not doing their jobs. And these letters get more and more stupid each time. She's like, clearly y'all aren't paying attention to horoscopes. These bitches were murdered by animals. You need to bring them to justice. Here is every single example from the Bible and from history of all the fucking times every animal has ever been put on trial. I hope you keep this in mind during your investigation. So stupid. She really sucks. She also spent so much time philosophizing, and I'm just like, can you please just shut up and do your job already? Even with how boring and slow this book was, it was painfully easy to solve. In the first third of the book, I was already getting this vibe. It reminded me of a killer from one of my favorite movies, and then that turned out to be what happened. I don't want to spoil too much, so I'll just say this. Serial mom.
Somebody ought to kill her.
Yeah. Give her a happy face. Then recycle her.
For the sake of this planet, somebody just might.
So there you have all the books I read in February. Which of these do you want to read? What was your favorite read in February? Let me know in the comments below. Once again, make sure to check out my brand new Patreon for that exclusive video about Don't Cry For Me, and much more exclusive content coming in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!